All right, so today we're going to be covering slope. Now, when we talk about slope, we're talking about the steepness of a line. But typically, when we want to measure slope, we look at a line, we take 2 points from the line, and then we put it into the slope formula to figure out what the slope will be. So the slope is just going to be a number. We call it m, and it's going to measure the steepness of a line. It's going to be defined as the change in y, on top of the fraction. And then on the bottom, we're going to have the change in x. When we do that, we could also write it this way. The change in y over the change in x, where this triangle is actually the Greek letter delta, and delta is going to mean change in this situation. So we always take the change in y and we divide it by the change in x. We can also say that's the same thing as rise over run. You may have heard of that. Rise over run, where rise is going to be the change in the y values. So that's going to be how far up or how far down you go. And the run on the denominator is going to be the change in x. And that's going to be the measure of how far to the right you go or how far to the left you go. And then we can write it as the formula y2 minus y1, since that's going to be the change in the y values. And we're going to divide that by x2 minus x1, which is going to be the change in the x values. And typically, we put the second coordinate first, but you could also write it where the first coordinate is first. So on top, you could have y1 minus y2. And then on the bottom, you can have x1 minus x2. Just make sure to keep the order consistent on the top and the bottom. So that's going to be the formula we're going to be using to find the slope between 2 points. So let's look at the first example on the next slide. So for this first one, what I want to do is I want to take 2 points and I want to use the formula to figure out what the slope of the line that goes through the 2 points is going to have. And our first example is going to be the point 18, 7. And then the second point is going to be 7, -4. So what I want to do is I want to use this formula, y2 minus y1 on top, divided by x2 minus x1 at the bottom. Well, first, I have to identify what my coordinates are. We know that the x's are always going to come first when we do ordered pairs. So in an ordered pair x comma y, the x value always comes first. So this is going to be an x, and this is going to be an x. The y value always comes second. So we're going to label this y and this y. And then we have to add some order to it. So typically we would use the subscript 1, since this is the first x coordinate, and we would use x2. The subscript 2 means that that's the second x coordinate. And then this would be a y1, and this would be a y2. So now we know what our numbers are, and we can use these and plug them into this formula. So we get m is equal to y2, which is going to be -4 right here, -4, minus y1, which is 7. On the bottom of the fraction, in my denominator, I'm going to have x2 minus x1. That's going to be x2 right here, that's 7, minus x1, that's going to be 18. So now I've got my formula, I've put my numbers in, and now I want to simplify the top and the bottom of the fraction. So let's do the top first. What's negative 4 minus 7? That would be negative 11, right? And then in the denominator, we have 7 minus 18. What would that be? That would be a negative number. That would be negative 11. So now we have the top divided by the bottom. Negative 11 divided by negative 11 is going to give me a positive 1. And that's going to be my answer. So the line that goes through these 2 points up here is going to have a slope of 1. All right, let's look at the next problem. Number 2. I've got 20, comma, negative 10. And then I have the point 8, comma, negative 12. Well, I label my 2 points. This is going to be x1, y1. And this is going to be the second ordered pair with x2, y2. And then I'm going to use this formula where I put y2 minus y1 on top. And on the bottom of the fraction, I have x2 minus x1. So my y2 is going to be negative 12. That's my second y value. And my first y value is going to be a negative 10. So I'm actually going to have a double negative right here, where I have minus negative 10. On the bottom, I'm going to have x2 minus x1. That's going to be 8 minus 20. And then I go on to simplify it. I simplify the top, negative 12 minus negative 10. That's the same thing as negative 12 plus 10. That's going to give me negative 2. Now in the denominator of the fraction, I have 8 minus 20. That's going to be a negative number, negative 12. So now I have negative 2 divided by negative 12. I know that if I divide 2 negative numbers, I get a positive number. And in this case, the negatives are going to cancel out, leaving me with a positive number. So I can cancel those 2 out. And then 2 divided by 12, I can simplify to give me 1 over 6. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm dividing the top and the bottom by 2, and I get 1/6. That's going to be my slope. All right, let's look at the third one. I've got negative 10, comma, 0. And I've got negative 12, comma, positive 11. This time, I'm going to use the slope formula, y2 minus y1 on top. And then on the bottom, I'm going to have x2 minus x1. When I label my 2 ordered pairs, I'm going to have x1, y1. Over here, I'm going to have x2, y2. So then y2 is going to be 11. y1 is going to be 0. So I have 11 minus 0 on top. On the bottom, I'm going to have negative 12 minus negative 10, minus negative 10. That's going to give me a double negative. That's the same thing as a positive. On the top of the fraction, I have 11 minus 0. That's going to give me 11. And in the denominator, I'm going to have negative 12 plus 10. That's going to give me a negative 2. Now, if I was to put this inside of a calculator, I would get the number negative 5.5. So that's going to have a negative slope. Or I could just leave my answer as this negative fraction, negative 11 halves. So both of these answers are acceptable. One is a fraction and the other one is a decimal, but they are equivalent.